There will be no escapes from this camp.
Colonel von Luger, it is the sworn duty of all officers to try to escape.
Hey everybody, it's your old pal DayVeeJay again, back with another classic PS1 review and retrospective. And if I'm sounding slightly more chipper than usual, it's alright. I've just had my medication for the trauma incurred from my braving the horrors of Rayman on PS1. And yes, that game is pure horror, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Greater men than me have completely lost their minds even attempting it. You see this poor old chap here? Nah, he hasn't been through the horrors of trench warfare, he's just been playing the original Rayman in 1915. Yeah, be under no illusions, that game is just pure malevolence created by Lucifer himself to do nothing but pollute the world and bring about the fall of mankind. Maybe I should up the dosage a bit. But anyway, I survived that hell on earth, and I did say we'd take a look at some of the sequels to see if they're just as soul-destroying as their big brother. And since one comes after two, cause that's how numbers work, next up we've got Rayman 2. And yeah, not much more to say, except that we're still trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, so if you enjoy my content and have yet to subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it if you would do so. And with that out the way, let's get into it. So Rayman 2, The Great Escape, was again developed by Ubi Pictures and published by Ubisoft in 1999. It was originally on PS1, N64, Dreamcast and Windows, and it was also later ported to PS2 under the name Rayman Revolution in North America, and there was also a version on Game Boy Color called Rayman 2 Forever. Now, even though we're primarily going to be looking at the PS1 version, it was actually the PC version that I played back in the day, which I remember being a bit different. In fact, pretty much all the versions across all the various platforms had noticeable differences, not to the same extent as Nightfire on PC to the console version, which was a completely different game made by a different developer, but different enough not to overlook. So yeah, we'll probably take a look at some of those as well. So we get started and once again get ourselves a cutscene to explain what's been going on in the world of Rayman, or Rayman as this silly old Billy keeps calling him.
Rayman, look what the pirates have done to our world.
But anyway, apparently some nasty old robot pirates, who look like if the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica teamed up with Long John Silver from Treasure Island, have turned up and are enslaving all the creatures of the land, including old Ray Ray himself. No! Who will save us now? You see, this is where AI's leading to. Any day now, ChatGPT's gonna be forcing us all to walk the plank. You mark my words. And on top of that, the daft fucking beggars have also explored the heart of the world. And what is that? Well, you know, it's the heart of the world. Exactly what it says on the tin, which has become divided in 800 lumps of energy. Yeah, 3 guesses who's gonna have to round all them back up. We then come to the Buccaneer, yeah, the literal Flying Dutchman over here, and the main vessel of the pirates, where we find our trusty hero locked up and looking all defeated and despondent. But fear not, cause we've got this mad lad locked up with us, who as it turns out is here to break us out. Oh, so it's less the Great Escape and more, Prison Break. Yeah. Anyway, it gives you some of your power back, you escape the ship, and now we can get into the game, where we find that we're now in full glorious 3D. Yeah, none of that old 2D shitty rubbish around here. But that's not the only difference, since we do start with a decent range of abilities this time around. It's mostly just the standard range you see in this kind of game. You can run around, jump, hang on ledges, climb up walls, hang from ceilings, you can swing on the fly and oar things again, use your helicopter hair, and you can also swim now. You do unlock some more later into the game, although these are mostly just upgrades to abilities you already have, so that is a little disappointing. It would have been better if we could have unlocked some abilities that were actually new, since that would help keep the game from becoming repetitive, but it's not a big deal, what we get is good enough. So we're just going around looking for our mate, and we've also got to find the Fairy Lee so she can give us the rest of our powers back. But too bad, because apparently the pirates have already gotten their grubby metal hands on her, so now we've got to rescue her. Then we meet these little guys who take you to the Hall of Doors, which is basically just the level select screen. So yeah, like the previous game, and most rollback games, we've got a bunch of levels to go through, but there aren't really any different worlds this time around, although there are parts where you won't be able to go any further until you've collected the sufficient number of lums. The yellow lums are the main collectible which you'll find throughout most levels. You don't have to collect every single one to make it through the game, just as long as you find most of them, you should be alright. And there's also different coloured lums which do different things. The red lums give you health, the green ones are checkpoints, and the blue ones replenish your air when you're underwater. But that's not all, because we've also got more cages to smash, which contain some of the poor creatures captured by the pirates. Although you don't have to smash these to progress through the game, except the final one in each level, because they contain the little guy what will send you back to the Hall of Doors afterwards. But it's still a good idea, since the creatures inside will heal you and slightly increase your maximum health. There's usually at least 4 cages in each level. You'll always know when you're near one, since you can hear the sounds of their chains swinging and the creature inside begging for help, which gets louder the closer you get, although it does get a little annoying at times. Like you'll be busy dealing with enemies or grabbing all the other collectibles, but then you've got these wallies over here constantly going, help, 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 and I'm just like,
Yes, I'm coming, wait a moment.
The main enemies this time are of course the Cylon pirates, who you'll encounter at various points throughout your journey, although they are fairly easy to deal with. Once again, your main weapon is your magic disembodied fist, which you can throw at enemies. Well, they say that, when really you're just throwing balls of magic at them. I mean, you can clearly see Rayman's hands never leave his side, but whatever, it functions fine enough. And you can also bounce your magic balls off of surfaces to hit things what maybe you can't hit directly. There's also a targeting feature so you can lock onto enemies and dance around them to avoid their shots. You've just got to watch out, because when you hit them, they become invincible for a few seconds, longer than you might expect, so keep that in mind, otherwise you might be wondering why your attacks aren't doing anything even though they're on target. And while the pirates are your main enemies, you do have other adversaries, including some returning from the previous game, like the annoying little bomb guy things, but again they're simple enough to deal with this time. So yeah, overall the combat, while simple, is decent enough, except for the fact that when your health gets low, not only does the bar start to flash, but it also makes this beeping sound. And yeah, that doesn't take long to get annoying at all. I mean, what, is the flashing health bar and Rayman's face looking all weary not enough? You need to have this irritating beeping as well? What do you think, I'm blind or something? I mean, if I was, I probably wouldn't be playing this, so yeah, just don't really see the point. So probably the biggest question you'll have about this game, especially if you're coming here from my review of its predecessor is this one anywhere near as ball-piercingly difficult as the first one? And the answer is, no, not at all. In fact, overall, it's actually pretty easy. Not to the point where it's too easy, there's still a decent level of challenge. It's just a lot more reasonable this time around. No save states required here. I mean, you've got a proper health bar now, checkpoints are pretty regular, and there's no game overs or anything. Like if you fall down a hole and die, you just lose a bit of health and it puts you back to your last checkpoint. And if you lose all your health, then it returns you to the start of the section of the level you're on. And that's fine, since, to be honest, I've never thought having lives and putting you back to the start of the level or whatever when you lose them all makes the game more challenging anyway. It just makes it more annoying, having to do things I've already done just cause I lost all my lives at some point later on. But on top of that, the platforming isn't quite as intricate as that of the first game either. You've still got things like moving platforms and whatnot, but it's not too bad since the game's nowhere near as pedantic about how fast and precise you've got to be. You don't have to be like the Flash on crank or anything, and the controls are really good as well. Not that they weren't in the previous game, but they're even better here, especially for a 3D platformer. They've got a good amount of weight to them without being overly heavy or clunky, so you get around pretty quick while still being precise. There weren't any points where I got stuck or felt that the controls got me killed or anything, none that I can remember at least. So anyway, you find the fairy Lee and then have to free her.
Oh, Rayman, at last.
Stop calling him Rayman! It's Rayman! I keep thinking you're trying to call him Raymond! Stop it! But anyway, you save her, but turns out she's too weak to give you all your power back, the useless old biddy. But then she tells you about the 4 masks of Polycus. The 4 masks of Polycus. But they disappeared over 10 million years ago. But anyway, it turns out this Polycus bloke is meant to be like the Arceus Arceus, or whatever, of Rayman's world, and the only other thing with the power to stop the pirates. But of course it's not that simple, since in order to get him to get off his lazy arse and help, we've got to find his 4 masks first. Oh yeah? If he's so powerful, how's the daft Pelonka managed to misplace them? But yeah, we've got to find this weirdo's 4 masks before the pirates, led by the Admiral Razorbeard. Well, at least it's more original than Mr. Dark, and that forms the main crux of the story. On top of the regular gameplay, we've also got some new set pieces to help keep things interesting. Like at one point you meet this river snake thing who you can then use to water ski down the river collecting lums and whatnot. Then there's these rocket things what come after you and you've got to run around until they get tired and then you can jump on them and break them in like in Red Dead and then use them to ride through certain areas unharmed. And then later on you can take the gunpowder kegs you can pick up to a torch which will then set off the gunpowder and let you fly. Because, yeah, that's exactly how that works. And not just... But yeah, even though these bits could be a little annoying to control, they were fun and helped keep the game interesting and from becoming repetitive. We've also got bonus levels again, although these aren't in the actual levels themselves and instead appear a couple times in between, like they'll just be off to the side in the Hall of Doors, and these are fine enough. Basically, they're just these races where you're running with Lee or one of her fairy friends, only you're not actually racing her, you're racing against the clock, so I'm not really sure what she's doing here, but whatever. So yeah, even though they're not all that interesting, it's still a good idea to do them because you get yellow lums which goes towards the total you need to progress through the game. There aren't really any boss fights like there were in Rayman 1. I mean there are bosses but they don't really play out the same way. Like sometimes when you reach one of the masks you've got to defeat its guardian before you can get it, but they're not really boss fights in the traditional sense. Like for the first one, you've just got to swing on a bunch of the oath things while the guy's shooting at you, and then hit a stalactite to make it drop on his head, and that's it. Then later you've got one chasing you and you've got to hit the stalactites to again make them fall on his head, only this time you've got to time it right so they'll fall while he's under them. So while I'm glad they're nowhere near as hard or annoying as those in the first game, I do wish they could have been a bit more complex and interesting, cause there's really just not much to them here. So yeah, this is simple enough, not a whole lot to say. Oh god, what's this? Oh, spider! Get away! Get away!
Don't like spiders.
Get away from me, you 8-legged freak! Piss off! Go away! But just cause the game's a lot more reasonable doesn't mean it doesn't retain at least a measure of the evil of its big brother, because oh, it does, which you'll quickly discover as you get into the second half of the game. Like you've got this one level where it's just a really fast-paced platforming bit where you've got to get through as fast as you can while you've got this flying treasure planet ship firing at you and destroying all the wooden plank bits you're running on. And for the most part it was fine, and actually pretty fun, because even though you've got to move fast, it's still reasonable enough, so it's not too hard. But it could be annoying at some bits where the cannonball hits the planks ahead of you, and if you're going too fast you'll end up running over the edge and dying, so watch out for that. And then later on, old Captain Pugwash is getting sick of Rayman messing up his plans, so he sends this ninja pirate guy after you, who ends up being like kind of a mini-boss or whatever, since he keeps cropping up and you've got to fight him over and over and over again. And this guy's annoying as all hell. He kind of teleports, I guess, and he moves too fast for you to hit him, so what you've got to do is stop still for a moment so he'll appear and try and get you with his hook, and then quickly get out the way so he'll miss and get himself stuck for a couple moments so then you can hit him. But that's easier said than done, cause if you stay still for a fraction of a second too long he'll get you, and he does quite a bit of damage when he does. But if you move a fraction of a second too fast, he won't get stuck and just disappear again. And even when he does get stuck, you've only got a couple moments to hit him before he's gone again. And it can be difficult getting out of his way and then getting yourself back into the right spot to hit him before he teleports away. Yeah, I hated this annoying prick. He's a prick. Yeah, I've been trying not to swear in this video, have you noticed? But I just really need to make my hatred for this wanker as clear as can be. And of course, they bring back the bit from the first game where you can fly for longer, but then you've got to carefully navigate your way through a bit where just about everything hurts you if you touch it. And this was about as annoying as before, since even though your helicopter hair controls fine when you're just moving from one platform to the next, it's not quite as good when you're having to move slowly and precisely through an enclosed area where you're not allowed to touch the sides. Touch the sides. Especially when you've got giant fans blowing you forward so you can't even control your speed. Yeah, nothing in this one ever got as infuriating as the first game, but there were a few bits that did grind the proverbial gears, so to speak. The graphics are pretty much what you would expect for the time. They're decent enough. The environments and character models are pretty well detailed and the lighting's atmospheric. The art style's still bright and colourful, although not to the same extent as the first game, and instead goes for a more muted and realistic look, or as realistic as you can get with something like this. And while I did like the look of the first game, I think the art style works fine here since it is in 3D, whereas that was 2D. And we've got proper voice acting this time as well. And yeah, it's fine enough. Some of the line reading's a bit ropey, but it's serviceable for the most part. I really like the soundtrack. Again, it's the kind you'd expect from a game like this. It's got the same light and whimsical quality as that of the first game that goes well with the world and gameplay, while also combining things like bright acoustic and moody electric guitars and grungy electronic to create a more distinct sound and complement the slightly darker story. One thing I did find kind of disappointing is that this one isn't quite as imaginative with its setting as the first game was. See, while it's still set in a fantastical world full of magic and wonder, it is pretty much just the same that you see in other games of this type. Like while in Rayman 1 you had places like the music world, the art world and the candy world, here you're mostly just going through the same green, swampy, foresty and jungle-like areas. Yeah, there are some different environments, like when you're going through the underground lava-filled labyrinths, or when you end up in Hades' underworld for one level, but I just didn't feel there was as much variety here as in the previous game. Although maybe the developers just felt that the more imaginative worlds of Rayman 1 didn't fit well with the story in this one, but who knows? Well, I guess they do, but never mind. But anyway, once you've acquired the 4 masks, old Papa Polycus finally decides to pull his finger out and help fight the pirates. Although conveniently, he has no power in the air. Some godlike being you are. Meaning it's up to Rayman to lead the assault on the pirates' main ship and free all the poor captured creatures. And this is simple enough. You've just got to slide down through the ship, avoiding all the hazards in your way, and then fly on one of the horse rocket things like you do in the trench run at the end of A New Hope. Hell, some of it even looks like the inside of the Death Star for some reason. You get inside the ship, free all the prisoners, all 14 of them. How many slaves did the pirates take again? Oh, only 45,263. What about the rest of them, Rayman? You don't care about them? You only care about saving your own mates? So yeah, sorry guys, I guess you're gonna have to figure your own way out. But anyway, with all the prisoners free, it's time to save our friend Glowbox and put an end to old Long John Shithead's reign of terror once and for all. And this first bit's pretty easy. You've just got to fight him in his big kid-friendly Wolfenstein robot thing while he throws bombs at you, which you've got to hit back at him. Although it could be a little annoying because you've got to make sure to aim them at the right spot to hit him, since if you're off center by just a little bit, he'll just move out the way and you'll miss. Then once you've hit him a few times, the floor falls apart with both of you falling through, and then you end up in an on-rails bit where you fly in one of the horse rocket things while the guy's throwing more bombs at you where you've got to hit back at him, while avoiding all the other shit he throws out. And that's fine, but then he starts firing these heat-seeking rocket things at you, what you've got to let nearly hit you, dodging out the way at the very last second, and then wait for it to come back at you and dodge out the way again, but in the right place, so then it hits him. And this was a bit annoying as well, because it's pretty hard to avoid all the stuff he sends at you, and if you get killed, then you've got to go back and do the first bit again. But anyway, once you take down all his health, there you go. Razor Prick's flying robot thing's destroyed, but the guy's got one more trick up his sleeve and sets off its self-destruct sequence before escaping. The ship goes boom and yeah, I guess that's the end for old Ray Ray, since next thing they're having a memorial for him like at the end of Halo 3. But oh,
were it so easy,
Because no, of course Ray's still alive, although minus a foot now. And I've literally just now realised that just before Ray turns back up, all like, hey guys, don't worry, I'm not dead, they were all just standing around his dismembered foot. Like, that's a bit morbid, don't you think? Just standing around staring at someone's amputated body parts. Like, what if there was just his head left? Would they be standing around staring at his decapitated head? What's wrong with you people? Anyway, they're all happy, the day is saved, Glowbox is still alive, somehow, and yeah, that's that. So that was Rayman 2, The Great Escape on PS1, and in conclusion, it's in the name. It's great. In fact, I think it's up there with Crash 2 and Spyro 2 in terms of great sequels to PS1 games. The transition from 2D to 3D certainly makes for more interesting gameplay, and there's a good range of abilities and set pieces to keep the game from ever feeling repetitive. The difficulty is definitely a lot more reasonable, to the point where the game may even seem a little too easy some of the time, although there were still a couple bits that were challenging, but on the whole it was nowhere near as frustrating as its predecessor. The graphics are decent enough, and I really like the soundtrack, although I felt the world wasn't quite as imaginative or varied as what we had in the previous game. Although, like I said, that might be more to do with the slightly darker story this time. But overall, yeah, the game's a lot of fun. It's got a lot of charm and a good sense of humour. It controls and plays well. It never felt boring or repetitive. And on the whole, it's just a great sequel. So if you haven't played it, I recommend you do so. But just when you thought we were done, oh, what's this? The adventure goes on. What could this be? Wait, what? Oh god, no, not again. Please, not again. It can't be. It just can't be. No! No! I won't! I won't! You can't make me! You can't make me! But yeah, apparently if you collect enough of the yellow lums, in my case it was 90%, you unlock a bonus bit after completing the main game, which just happens to be a side-scrolling level in the style of Rayman 1, which as it turns out is actually taken from a cancelled prototype of Rayman 2, which I guess was going to be in 2D before, I don't know, they decided to scrap it and do a 3D sequel instead. And guess what? It's the most annoying part of the whole entire game. I know, big shock, right? But yeah, it plays pretty much like the original Abomination. You just make your way through the level, taking out enemies and jumping between platforms. You've got most of the same abilities. You can use your flying fist, swing on the oath things, use your helicopter hair, etc. And it plays fine enough. But like I said, it's still annoying as all hell. You've got tons of hazards what'll hurt you just from touching them. There's enemies off in the background shooting at you, moving platforms what you've got to time your movements just right to land on. It's also pretty confusing to navigate because you've got these teleporter things what'll send you into the background, and I guess you've got to use them to figure out your way through. And suffice to say, I didn't get very far before I sacked that in. Yeah, I just can't deal with that shit again. Thank God they scrapped it and went in a different direction, because if they didn't, well, let's just say this video will be a whole lot different as well. But I did say we'd take a look at some of the other versions, so let's do that real quick. We'll start with the PC version, which I believe was actually the original version I played back in the day, which is also the same as the version on N64, except for a different soundtrack and slightly better graphics. Fundamentally, the game's pretty much the same. You're just going around collecting the yellow lums, of which there are 1,000 now, or 999, because Razor B and eats one. And you've also got the cages to smash, although this time they just contain more lums. However, a lot of the levels are different, with the PS1 version having removed and changed a few of them while merging others together for some reason. It controls mostly the same, although the version I played on PC I found a lot more difficult since it only used keyboard, so yeah, that was a pain. Instead of the Fairy Lee, we now have this flying frog thing called Murphy as our guide, and for some reason there isn't proper voice acting in these versions, so instead all the characters just speak this weird fictional Simlish language. And yes, I did look that up, just to be 100% certain before I insulted someone's real life language. But yeah, it's just gibberish, and it's fine enough. In fact, it sometimes sounds better than the actual voice acting in the PlayStation version, and really it kind of fits better with the whole world in my opinion. There's more bonus levels too. Basically here, if you collect all the lums and smash all the cages in a level, then you unlock an extra bonus level, and these are just insane. I mean, you've got this one where you play as one of the little glow box things and you've got to race this robot pirate to the ferry. But to make the little guy move, you've got to tap the left and right arrow keys as fast as you can. And let me tell you, you've got to be like the Usain Bolt of typing or something to do this shit. I mean it. I was hitting the keys as fast as I could and I couldn't do it. My wrists and fingers were literally seizing up, I was typing so fast, and it still wasn't enough. I mean, Jesus, I would have thought all my years of using my right hand would have prepared me for something like this, but nope, apparently not. And now we'll take a look at the PS2 version, known as Rayman Revolution in North America, which I guess is meant to be like the definitive version or whatever. It's still very similar to the previous versions, but with a few differences and improvements. One of the biggest differences is that we no longer have the Hall of Doors, which is now replaced with a kind of semi-open world hub area for you to explore and access levels from. Which, to be honest, I don't think is really that necessary, since it kinda just made things more confusing, even when there's signs telling you which way certain levels are. I think it just made the game more complicated than it needed to be. I would have preferred just to have the Hall of Doors again. The graphics are of course a lot nicer, and it controls a little better than the previous gen versions, which already controlled pretty well to begin with. But here the controls and movement just felt a little lighter and more responsive. Well, for the most part. I found just generally running around and platforming to control better, but things like the water skiing and the horse rocket things actually seemed a little harder to control, like I just found myself crashing and dying a lot more during these bits. Again, the basic gameplay is pretty much identical to the previous versions. You're just going through levels, collecting yellow lums and smashing cages, which this time contain these blue familiar spirit things. Just why couldn't they settle on what's in the cages? I mean, we've already had 3 different things across various versions. Why can't you just pick something and stick with it? But anyway, for every 10 you collect, the Fairy Lee will unlock a new minigame for you, of which there are 8. And they're okay, I guess, although they're not really anything special. There's not much to them. You've just got to collect all the red lums within the time limit, and sometimes they're just repeats of things you already did in the main game, like the water skiing bit. One new feature is that you can actually use the yellow lums you collect to buy upgrades for your abilities, such as being able to run while carrying objects like gunpowder kegs, or increase the rate at which you can use your fists to hit enemies. So that's pretty cool, since it gives you more reason to go out of your way to collect as many of the lums as possible, especially since they seem to have removed the lum requirement for progressing further into the game. In addition to the semi-open world hub areas, the gameplay itself is a little less linear here. See, like in many of the other platformers we've looked at, there's certain parts of levels that you can't access without abilities that you don't get until later on. Like you can learn to do Glowbox's weird rain dance and whatnot, meaning you will have to come back to levels you've already beaten if you want to collect everything. Again, there's quite a few differences in the levels, with many being restructured and having new stuff added, like extra boss fights, and there's even a few completely new levels, which while cool, isn't always for the better. Like you've got this bit where you've got to fight pretty much a whole army of pirates all by yourself, which was okay at first, but then went on for way longer than it should have. And then there's this bit where you're actually flying one of the pirates' ships to rescue Glowbox's kids from the pirate mines. And that sounds like it should be fun, right? Well, no, not really. It's mostly just slow and tedious, and again, goes on longer than it should. Just feels like you're playing that Peter Pan ship ride at Disneyland if you ask me. On the ninja pirate guy turns back up as well, but he's no longer a boss. He just protects these generator things what you've got to destroy at one point, and you don't actually have to beat him, probably because they realised how much of an annoying prick he was in the other versions. The bonus levels are back as well, and are they any easier here?
No.
Yeah, if you thought it'd be any easier on a controller as opposed to keyboard. Yeah, nope. In fact, it's even harder, because it's even more awkward trying to hit the buttons as fast as you can when you're holding a controller. And I also didn't realise it until I played this version, but apparently all the bonus levels are just this. Just you practically breaking your fingers trying to get this little piece of shit to move. The only difference is the reward you get for winning. If by some miracle you actually do, which then you must have some seriously magic fingers or some shit. Man, the ladies must love you. But yeah, that's Rayman 2 for you. Overall, I think I like the PS1 version the best. It was a lot of fun without being too hard or complicated. The PS2 version had a few improvements. It looked and controlled better, but I felt they overcomplicated it a bit with the open hub world and the less linear gameplay. And the PC version was more annoying since it can only play with keyboard, but whichever of the main versions you choose, you should have a good time. And again, if you've never played it, then I recommend you do so. And that's about it. Well, there's another one down. At least this one didn't drop a nuke on the last lingering vestiges of my sanity. That's something, I guess. And well, going back to our little maths lesson at the start, we've had 1, we've had 2, you know what's next. Or at least, I hope you do, because if you don't, then just Jesus. But yeah, to close out this year's classic platformer trilogy, last year we did Crash Bandicoot, the year before we did Spyro, we're going to be looking at Rayman 3 Hoodlum Havoc next. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But anyway, thank you very much for watching the video, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then leave a like. If you didn't, then tell me to do something very bad to myself. Yeah, that'll do. We're still trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, so if you enjoy my content and have yet to subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it if you would do so. And as always, thank you so much to everyone who already has. And if you want to support the channel further, consider donating to my Patreon. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.